Is Christianity just paganism with a new name? The question no one wants to ask. Most Christians believe their faith is unique, a divine revelation untouched by human invention. The birth of Jesus, his death, his resurrection, they're seen as holy events set apart from all other religions. But what if I told you many of these ideas existed long before Jesus? And what if the earliest Christians didn't erase pagan traditions, but absorbed them, rebranded them, and gave them a new name? This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a historical possibility. Today, we'll explore how ancient pagan beliefs, gods, rituals, festivals, might have been repackaged into what we now call Christianity. Once you see the connections, you might never look at your Bible the same way again. The birth story, not as unique as you think. The nativity story feels sacred, a virgin mother, a guiding star, wise men from the east. But long before Bethlehem, similar tales were told. Horus, Mithras, Krishna, all were said to be born of virgins, heralded by celestial signs, and visited by sages or shepherds. Even the December 21st date, that was a festival of the Roman sun god Sol Invictus, celebrating the rebirth of light after winter solstice. Early Christian leaders didn't just pick that date randomly. It aligned perfectly with existing pagan celebrations. In other words, it was a marketing move before marketing even existed. Sacred meals, pagan communion. The Christian Eucharist, bread and wine, representing the body and blood of Christ, is seen as a unique spiritual act. But in pagan Rome, worshippers of Mithras shared a sacred meal of bread and wine too. The followers of Dionysus drank wine as a symbol of divine presence. By adopting a familiar ritual, Christianity didn't alienate converts. It gave them something they already understood, but with a new theological meaning. Death and resurrection. An old story. Jesus' death and resurrection are the heart of Christian faith, but the concept of a dying and rising God wasn't new. Osiris was killed, dismembered, and resurrected. Attis died under a tree and returned after 3 days. Tammuz descended to the underworld and rose again. For ancient people, resurrection stories symbolized hope, the promise that life could triumph over death. Christianity didn't invent that hope. It simply offered the ultimate version of it. Sun god imagery, the light of the world. Jesus is called the light of the world, a metaphor that feels purely spiritual. But in Roman religion, the sun itself was divine. The halo we see in Christian art, that's the same radiant crown worn by Helios, the Greek sun god, and Sol Invictus. Even Sunday, the day of Christian worship, was originally the day of the sun in Roman culture. When Christianity became the empire's religion, it didn't erase solar worship, it baptized it. Festivals from pagan to Christian. Easter feels Christian, but its name comes from Aostra, a pagan goddess of spring and fertility. Its symbols, eggs and rabbits, were fertility icons long before Jesus. Christmas absorbed Yule traditions from Germanic pagans, evergreen trees, wreaths, gift-giving. Rather than forbid these traditions, the Church repurposed them, turning pagan holidays into Christian holidays. It was cultural adaptation on a massive scale. Moral codes, not entirely new. The Ten Commandments are foundational to Christian ethics, but similar moral codes existed in Egypt's 42 Laws of Ma'at and Babylonia's Code of Hammurabi. Teachings like loving your neighbor, caring for the poor, and avoiding theft weren't invented by Christianity. They were universal human values, given divine authority in different religions. By presenting these morals as God's law, the Church strengthened their authority while keeping them relatable to converts from various backgrounds. Temples and priesthood, a familiar structure. The early Christian Church borrowed heavily from existing religious hierarchies. Robes, incense, altars, choirs, these weren't Christian innovations. They mirrored the ceremonial grandeur of pagan temples, which helped converts feel at home. The Church didn't start as a blank slate. It grew inside a world already saturated with sacred imagery and ritual. Symbols, more pagan than you think. The fish symbol, ictus, is tied to early Christians, but fish were sacred in pagan fertility cults. The cross, though now a symbol of Christ's sacrifice, was a pre-Christian emblem in many cultures, representing life, death, and the four seasons. Even baptism by water has parallels in pagan purification rituals, from Egyptian Nile ceremonies to Greek initiation rites. Did Christianity copy paganism? So here's the big question. If so much of Christianity's structure, imagery, and ritual comes from pagan traditions, is it really new? The answer might be more complex. Early Christians didn't necessarily steal paganism. They transformed it. They took symbols people already loved and gave them a new story. It wasn't about deception. It was about making a revolutionary faith feel ancient and familiar at the same time. Why the Church doesn't highlight this? For centuries, church leaders have downplayed these parallels, worried they would weaken faith. Some call them satanic imitations, others simply ignore them. But hiding history doesn't protect truth. If Christianity is divine, it should stand up to comparison. And if it shares roots with paganism, maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe it shows that spiritual truths have always been with humanity, long before a carpenter from Nazareth walked the earth. Final thoughts. Faith reimagined. Maybe Jesus was the fulfillment of all those ancient stories. Maybe he was the divine reality that myths only foreshadowed. Or maybe Christianity is exactly what it looks like. Paganism, refined and rebranded for a new age. Either way, knowing the past doesn't have to destroy faith. It can deepen it. Because whether we worship Horus, Mithras, or Christ, humanity has always been telling the same story. Light defeats darkness. Life defeats death. And hope never dies.